The Zhaogu Bird, a Chinese folk tale. There once lived an old woman, wicked to the core. She had a son and an unmarried daughter. Soon after the son married, he departed to the eastern lands beyond the Great Wall, leaving his new bride behind. That was when the old woman began to torment her daughter-in-law mercilessly, though she cherished and adored her own daughter. "Have a few more of these white-steamed buns, my dear daughter," the old woman would coax, "and try this millet soup." And the daughter, when her mother wasn't looking, would occasionally slyly slip a few of those white buns to the daughter-in-law. The old woman would then glare fiercely at her son's wife and mutter, "The way you eat and drink. Not even bran cakes would be enough to fill you up." The mother-in-law gave the poor bride neither decent food nor clothes, but instead beat and scolded her from dawn till dusk. That year, the old woman had bred a countless number of silkworms, so many they stretched beyond the horizon, impossible to count. Every day, before the break of dawn, the old woman would drive her daughter-in-law up the mountains to gather mulberry leaves. The bride would gather for one day, then another. The sun was high, the evening still distant, and the mulberry trees were nearly stripped bare, threatening to be left completely naked. Yet the silkworms grew larger and plumper with each passing hour. In the 4th month, the silkworm larvae began to turn pale. When leaves were scattered, all one could hear was the constant rustle. Shala, shala. And in the blink of an eye, not a single leaf remained, the larvae having devoured them all. Scatter more. Shala, shala. And again, all gone. As the daughter-in-law prepared to head to the hills, the mother-in-law jabbed a finger at her and screamed, "A daughter-in-law is nothing more than a horse in the household. If I wish, I'll ride her. If I wish, I'll beat her. Dare to return without those mulberry leaves. I'll whip you with a lash, break a stick over your back. You'll not eat for 3 days and not sleep for 5. The old woman watched her daughter-in-law disappear with a spiteful look. Turning back, she saw her own daughter carefully picking up silkworms from the ground. Pity welled up in the old woman, overwhelming her. "My wonderful little girl," she said tenderly, "take a rest. The daughter-in-law will do all this work when she returns. Do you want something to drink? Or perhaps to eat? I saved some soup in the pot and placed a white bun on the lid for you." The daughter, it must be said, was a great beauty, and her temperament was nothing like her mother's. She felt great sympathy for her brother's wife. Hearing her mother's words, she turned and said, "How am I better than my sister-in-law, that I should leave the work for her?" The old woman heard her daughter defy her, raised her hand, but did not strike, opened her mouth, but did not curse, for she loved her child too much. She waved her hand away in annoyance and left. Meanwhile, the daughter-in-law reached the mountains and began searching for mulberry leaves. The sun was scorching, the slopes were steep. By the time she had struggled from the south mountain to the east mountain, and from the east to the north, it was noon, and her basket held barely a handful of leaves. Exhausted, the poor woman sat by the roadside and wept. Back at home, the old woman's daughter finished attending to the silkworms and fed them. She kept wondering, "How is my sister-in-law doing in the mountains? Has she gathered enough leaves? Or will she return empty-handed? I always worry about her, but today my heart is pounding and fluttering. She must be starving up there, the poor thing." With this thought, the girl took the white bun her mother had saved and poured some of the fine millet soup into a bowl. She quietly set off towards the mountains. Suddenly, she saw her sister-in-law sitting by the road, weeping bitterly. She took her hand and said, "Don't cry, sister-in-law. I brought you a bun baked from white flour and some fine millet soup. Quench your hunger and your thirst." The daughter-in-law replied, her face streaming with bitter tears. "If thirst overpowers me, I will drink spring water. If hunger overcomes me, I will eat bitter herbs." The girl pressed her again. "Why are you so sad, sister-in-law? Don't hide it from me. Tell me everything. I know your heart." Her sister-in-law replied, tears still flowing, "Sister, I walked all over the South Mountain, crossed the North Mountain from end to end, and found only a few mulberry leaves. But there are many oak leaves. I don't know how I can face your mother." The girl gently smoothed her sister-in-law's hair, wiped her tears, and said, "Don't be afraid, sister-in-law. Eat the bun, drink the soup, and we will go together to gather the mulberry leaves." The girl finally persuaded her to eat a piece of the bun and drink a little soup. Then, the two of them set off together to search. They walked and talked, sometimes wandering into a deep gorge, sometimes climbing to the very peak of a mountain. They had covered all the mountains and scoured every ridge, but they found only oaks. There was not a single mulberry tree in sight. The daughter-in-law watched the sun about to disappear behind the mountains and said through her tears, "It will be dark soon, sister. The wolves will emerge from their dens, and the tigers will leave their caves. Please, my sweet sister, go home quickly." The girl replied, "It will be dark soon, sister-in-law. The wolves will emerge, and the tigers will leave. Come, my dear sister-in-law, let's go back home together." The daughter-in-law looked at her empty basket and said, "I will wait a little longer, sister. Perhaps the mountain spirit will take pity on me and turn these oak leaves into mulberry leaves." The girl answered, "I will wait with you, sister-in-law. Perhaps the mountain spirit will take pity on me and turn the oak leaves into mulberry leaves." They took each other's hands, pressed close together, and began to descend the mountain. They reached the mountain spring and rounded another peak. They searched every ridge, no mulberry leaves anywhere, only oaks. The daughter-in-law saw the sun vanish behind the mountain. She hid behind the girl, wiped her tears, and said, "Do you see, sister, how dark the sky has become? The moon will rise soon. I heard that the mountain lord himself lives on this peak. He has a red nose and green eyes. Kind sister, you are so young. You really should go home quickly." The girl replied, "Do you see, sister-in-law, how dark the sky has become? The moon will rise soon. I also heard the mountain lord has a red nose and green eyes. Let's go home together." The daughter-in-law looked at the clear, transparent spring and said, "I will wait here a little longer. Perhaps the water spirit will take pity on me and turn the oak leaves into mulberry leaves." The girl answered, "I will wait with you. Perhaps the water spirit will take pity on me and turn the oak leaves into mulberry leaves." They held hands, pressing tightly together, and walked away from the spring. They reached the edge of the mountain forest. They had covered all the mountains and searched every ridge, but no mulberry trees were to be seen, only oaks. The daughter-in-law saw the moon rise and was again overcome with anxiety. She tried to persuade the girl to return home, but the girl would not listen. The daughter-in-law began to cry. The girl, too, was overcome with worry. The moon had risen, and her sister-in-law's basket was completely empty. Then, the south wind began to howl and whistle. "Ooh, ooh!" The water in the gorge rang. "Ding, dang!" The girl raised her head and shouted, "Mountain Lord! Mountain Lord! Turn the oak leaves into mulberry leaves, and I will marry you." As soon as she fell silent, the leaves on the oak trees began to rustle. The girl straightened up and shouted a second time, "Mountain Lord! Mountain Lord! Turn the oak leaves into mulberry leaves, and I will marry you." As soon as she fell silent, the branches on the oak trees began to sway and thrash about. And for a third time, the girl cried out, "Mountain Lord, Mountain Lord, turn the oak leaves into mulberry leaves, and I will marry you." The moment her voice ceased, a hurricane swept across the plain, shrouding the sky and the earth in a black curtain. Everything roared and boomed around them. Suddenly, the wind died down, and the moon drifted out from behind the clouds. And in the place of the oaks stood solid rows of mulberry trees. The girl and her sister-in-law gazed at the wondrous sight, their hearts filled with joy. They swung their arms and began to pluck the leaves. The leaves were emerald green, each the size of a palm. They had barely started gathering when the basket was filled to the brim. They lifted it together and began their descent from the mountain. Back home, the old woman was frantic, not knowing where her daughter had gone. She rejoiced so much when she saw her child, as if she had discovered a priceless treasure. But when she saw her daughter-in-law, it felt to the old woman as though a nail had been driven straight into her eye. She ignored the mulberry leaves, only cursing her daughter-in-law for taking her daughter to the mountains. As punishment, she ordered her daughter-in-law not to sleep, but to guard the silkworms all night. The next day, the daughter-in-law went to the mountains again for leaves, and the girl again brought her a white flower bun. On the peaks and ridges, not a single oak was visible. Only mulberry trees grew everywhere. Soon, the worms began to spin their thread and weave their cocoons. One day, as the daughter-in-law and the old woman's daughter sat reeling the cocoons at home, black clouds drifted in from the northwest, followed by a black whirlwind that touched the sky at one end and began to sweep the earth with the other. It shook the trees, tearing them out by the roots, and ripped the roofs from houses. Before the girl could even cry out, the whirlwind spun her up and carried her away. The daughter-in-law panicked, even beginning to cry. She rushed after the black whirlwind, but it threw trees and branches at her feet to scratch her, and tossed sand and stones to wound her hands. Yet she kept running. She would fall, get back on her feet, and run again. Forgetting herself, she chased the vortex, shouting, "Mountain Lord, give me back my sister." The black whirlwind sped away into the mountains, and the daughter-in-law followed. The emerald mulberries obstructed the poor woman's sight, and she lost track of where the black whirlwind suddenly disappeared. She searched the front mountain. She wandered the west mountain, wearing through the thick, sturdy soles of her shoes. She searched for a day, and then for a night. The thorny bushes tore her clothes to shreds. She searched and searched, but could not find her sister. She couldn't even find a trace of her. Spring passed, summer ended, and autumn arrived. Every blade of grass in the mountains knew that the poor woman was searching for her sister and flattened itself beneath her feet to make the walking softer. Every apple tree in the mountains knew and extended its branches with ripe fruit to the poor woman. And all the birds knew as well. They decided to save her from the cold. They plucked their own down and pulled out their feathers, scattering them towards the daughter-in-law. The down and feathers swirled like snowflakes and covered the poor woman. The next day, the north wind blew, and the daughter-in-law transformed into a beautiful little bird, covered in the down and feathers. She flew and cried out, "Zhaogu! Zhaogu!" Searching for my sister, searching for my sister. The cold passed, and spring returned. The beautiful little bird still flew among the emerald mulberry trees, crying, "Zhaogu! Zhaogu!" Searching for my sister, searching for my sister. The bird flew over endless fields. It flew across the blue sky with its white clouds and cried, "Zhaogu! Zhaogu!" Searching for my sister, searching for my sister.